John Tapscott.
And I'm Alex Tapscott.
And this is What's on Tap. Alex, let me start with kudos to you. You explained what DeFi is in less than 2 minutes. Mark Twain famously wrote to a friend, "I'm sorry I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short letter." I'm sure it took a little while, or was it creative editing and putting that together? So before you say anything, we're going to do I'm going to do a little innovation here on What's on Tap, and we're going to run the video. And for those of you listening in on a podcast, not on video, there are words, so you'll be able to hear this.
The most important technology in a generation has arrived, and it's called blockchain. Blockchain represents nothing short of the second era of the internet, and as such is going to have as great, if not a greater impact than the first era. When you use the internet today to send and move information, you're not sending an original thing, you're sending a copy. Now that's fine for emails and for texts and so forth, but it's very problematic when it comes to assets, things that have scarcity, like money or stocks and bonds. And so we've had to rely on middlemen, even as the internet has created a peer-to-peer network for information. Blockchain solves this problem. Blockchain enables for scarcity in digital goods. And the most exciting era of blockchain development today is in a space called DeFi, or decentralized finance. If Bitcoin enabled two individuals to move money peer-to-peer without the need for a bank or other intermediary, then DeFi enables peer-to-peer models for basically every single thing that the financial industry does. Not just moving money, but storing money, getting access to credit, exchanging assets, getting access to growth capital, insuring against catastrophic risk. FinTech is a new user interface that allows you to interact with the old financial world. DeFi is a new foundation. It is a new superstructure that allows us to reimagine the financial world as we know it in a way that is more transparent, more efficient, more fair, and ultimately more democratized, meaning more people can access it. In only a year and a half, the total value in DeFi projects has grown from around $1 billion to $150 billion. Uniswap, which is a decentralized exchange that sometimes does more daily volume than Coinbase, MakerDAO, and DAI. Its daily volumes often exceed that of Venmo. All of the different building blocks of the financial industry, in short, are being disrupted by DeFi. And I, for one, feel very fortunate to be a part of it.
Among other things, good production values. But, a lot of people are confused about fintech and DeFi, and that it clearly explained the difference. How about open finance? That's another term that kind of gets thrown around. How does that fit in?
Open finance is the in-between ground between the traditional world and the world of DeFi. And I think that's where a lot of innovation is occurring today. And I think it's where a lot of this is going to end up. So to be clear, DeFi is about the wholesale reinvention of the infrastructure of the financial industry. It's about building a system not with companies and counterparties, but with protocols and software. And it's about knitting together different technologies so that anyone, regardless of who they are or where they are, can access a rich array of financial services, right? In the same way that the internet allowed anybody to access a rich array of information. But I think ultimately there are lots of institutions in the world and other sort of structures like regulatory structures that it's going to make it difficult for DeFi to reach its unfettered potential. And I think what's going to end up happening is we're going to land somewhere in the middle. And we're already actually starting to see that with a number of DeFi protocols that are trying to make environments that are more familiar to institutional and traditional financial players. So Uniswap, for example, is looking to create basically like a separate pool with credentialing that would make it easier for institutions to trade on decentralized exchanges, for example. Just today, we saw R3 announcing that it was focused on building out a new DeFi platform using its own native token. By the way, a big change of strategy for a bank consortium with $120 million of funding and a focus on building walled gardens. But even still, it's not going full DeFi, so to speak. It's looking at building an environment where regulators and other overseers can basically keep an eye on what's happening inside of an environment where credentialing and permissions still exist to some degree. So I don't know if that's going to be successful, but I do think that ultimately we're going to see different kinds of versions of DeFi, DeFi for the common man, DeFi for the institution. And I think that somewhere in the middle is where we're going to land, where some institutions still have some influence in financial markets, and traditional companies that we're used to seeing are still there too. But I think the underlying technology that we're using is going to be radically different.
I had to chuckle. The Economist a couple of weeks ago did a cover story on DeFi. And they talked about it as a real thing, a revolution. But then the tagline was how this could help improve banks in the real world. So I guess you got your banks in the real world, and then you got all this other stuff that is not part of the real world that you are deeply involved in.
Yeah, well, remember, like the internet made it a lot easier for Blockbuster to reach a bigger audience and to build its own streaming service and to take over. Oh, wait, no, never mind. That never happened. It was Netflix that did that, not Blockbuster. Blockbuster went bankrupt.
No, but it helped Kodak build out its film business. But no,
that never happened either. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yellow Pages. I mean, ever since the internet came along, its search function improved a lot. No, wait, that's not true either. So yeah, I mean, like the idea of banks and governments being bleeding edge innovators in the world of DeFi is frankly laughable. And there's someone on Twitter, Meltem Demiros, had a funny quote where she said, asking the Economist for its opinion on DeFi is like asking a virgin their opinion on sex. I mean, it's a bunch of British journalists sitting in a room somewhere trying to think of what DeFi is without actually, using it or knowing what it is. So that's not to disparage the Economist. I love the Economist. I read it every week.
It's a good pub. And in fairness to the Economist, they wrote the first cover story on blockchain for a major publication. That was 2015, I think. I remember it just predated the publication of Blockchain Revolution. So anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and to their credit, I don't see any other major, not that there are any major newspapers left, but where's the mainstream media trying to do a deep, honest dive on something like this, right? We see the mainstream media typically fall woefully short in its coverage of technology, especially this area. That's for sure.
Well, I have some insider information, not in the financial market sense, but in the general sense, that you are working on a massive piece on this right now, and it's going to be the lead article in the new book. What do you want to call it? I thought it was going to be Digital Asset Revolution, but maybe it should be DeFi Revolution. I don't know. That's you're going to have to think about that. But it's being published by Barlow Books, and it's a compendium of great pieces from the Blockchain Research Institute on this topic.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, like what to name the book, because really it is about digital assets or tokens or digital bearer instruments, however you want to describe them, and the impact that they're having on the economy as a whole. Now, it just so happens that they're having the greatest impact today on financial services, which makes sense. It's an industry of assets, and this is a digital medium for value, so that makes sense. But it's not necessarily only about DeFi. So to say, to call it a book about DeFi is accurate, but misses the potential, I think, of the underlying technology to transform a lot more. I mean, even as part of the research, I'm spending a lot of time looking at DAOs. It happens to be that a lot of the biggest DAO treasuries today belong to DeFi protocols like Uniswap. But that's just a function of the fact that DeFi protocols were the first dApps to launch. And ultimately, it could be that the DAO, for some completely unrelated thing that has nothing to do with finance, ends up being the thing we're all talking about in a couple of years. So,
now, for those of you who are not fully au courant, Alex is not referring to the Dow Jones or the chemical company. He's referring to the Distributed Autonomous Organization, which is a concept. We called it pre the existence of any of these things. We called it the decentralized autonomous organization. We called it the decentralized autonomous enterprise. And in Blockchain Revolution, of course, a couple of weeks later, an actual thing appeared, unrelated to the book, no doubt. But anyway, that's a DAO.
Yeah, that is a DAO. The decision about that R3 is made to sort of open itself up, so to speak, to the world of DeFi, kind of helped can't help but feel it's got some similarities to the old internet debate of the 90s. And you know a little bit about that. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I do. In the early days, first there was the ARPANET and then the internet. And I was using the ARPANET in the 70s, actually, at Bell Northern Research. But the internet itself started to enable us to do email broadly in the late 80s and early 90s. And then with Tim Berners-Lee's great invention, the web, and really the release of the first graphic browser, Mosaic, that became Netscape, companies started to implement internet strategies. But back then, if this sounds familiar, it is. The word was, well, the internet, I mean, it's really the Wild West. Isn't that what Janet Yellen or somebody just called? Oh dear, Gary Gensler just called called crypto that. But anyway, it's the Wild West, and it's full of crime, and there's porn, and it's not secure, and it's not a real industrial age enterprise type computing. So we'll build our own versions of that are in-house, they're proprietary, they're our own private internets, and we called them they were called intranets. Then over time, as the net itself improved in security and robustness, and it became clear that this was a new platform for everything having to do with information, companies embraced that. Is that where you're going? It's a similar analogy today.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the idea that with blockchains, we love the idea of instant frictionless transactions, but we don't like the idea of a permissionless system where anybody can access it and where actors are, behaving anonymously or pseudo-anonymously, and we don't know where they are or who's behind them. So we're going to build these walled gardens and create environments for us to do blockchain, but in, our way. And I think that a lot of the initiatives to try and build those systems have not worked. And this is a dichotomy or tension that has existed really since the beginning of blockchain. I mean, Vitalik Buterin, who's the inventor of Ethereum, pretty well known by now, basically described it to us as such in an interview for the book way back when, and described these tensions. And I think his conclusion obviously was that open source systems generally tend to win out because they are programmable, they're permissionless, anybody can access them, and you can interconnect into them. And that's what we're seeing right now with crypto networks, which are the blockchain fit protocols that are supporting all of these applications. They are being woven together into an internet of blockchains with protocols like Cosmos and others playing a leading role.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the other analogy was pre-internet. It was computing platforms themselves. Every computer company had its own proprietary computer operating system. And you couldn't move your applications to another operating platform because the cost was prohibitive. It was called doing a conversion, which is a terrifying word to a CIO. And then eventually open source came along based on Unix. It became Linux. And now all of them share for their big servers, all of them, and for all kinds of other things, phones, share a common operating system. And all the action is moved up to a higher level of value creation. And that's how companies compete. Now, that's not to say that KYC and AML is a bad idea, is it? I mean,
No.
Or that you shouldn't have a application that's proprietary, say, to your customers if you're a bank. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be open. There are different levels of this whole storyline. I mean, do you want to just comment on that quickly? Because I think it's a confusing thing to people.
I think you described it very well. And I think that anarchy is not the goal for most people who are advocating these open systems. But they would argue that, what is the value of a closed environment that only a select few people can use to an industry like financial services, which requires scale and liquidity to function properly. So you need to be open and you need to be able to interconnect into other systems. So on the back end of this will be these open platforms, and on the front end will be applications that are specific to certain customers and use cases and asset classes and so forth, with various controls and whatnot on top of it. And that actually kind of ties back into what I said at the very beginning, and that's the world we're going to, is one where elements of the traditional financial system endure, but that are built on DeFi platforms and on blockchain networks that I think will, create an industry, as I said in the video, that is, fairer, more efficient, more transparent, more auditable, something that I think is kind of important, and ultimately more democratized, right? So that is the goal, and I think that's where we're headed.
Good discussion, to be continued, I guess. I think that's a good round for today. We do have some big announcements from the BRI. A new research project is completed. It's called Blockchain Transformation in Telecommunications. That's for members at blockchainresearchinstitute.org. The new book, Platform Revolution, edited by yours truly, will be released November 1st on Amazon. And it's available for pre-order now. Hey, get this. On Amazon.com, our publisher just sent us a note saying it's the #1 new release in the management category. So I think that's better than a kick in the pants, as my dad would have said. We'll be announcing the finalists for the 2021 Enterprise Blockchain Awards. And so stay tuned for the full announcement in our newsletter and on the website next week. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, sign up at blockchainresearchinstitute.org. And you can also, I gave a speech which was kind of a lot of fun. I think I mentioned this in the last session, to the Cardano World Summit. It was kind of crazy. It was a metaverse. And I afterwards went and watched myself giving the speech as a little avatar. There are all these other avatars running around. And my speech was on this big screen with me on another part of the screen. There were 88,000 people attended that thing. And I think that you can check it, a replay of it now that's available. And the speech was about a sort of state of the union of blockchain, but also looking at the whole issue of governance and stewardship. How do we move this whole thing forward? And as Pindar Wong famously said to us in a previous meeting, just because it's decentralized doesn't mean it should be disorganized. And Cardano and the parent organization, IOHK, has this big project underway to explore new models and techniques for governing crypto and blockchain platforms and protocols. More on that soon. I also held the inaugural Holo Session webinar for Art Media last Tuesday, and that's available on the Art Media site, ARHT. They're our partners for holograms, and we'll be using them for the Enterprise Blockchain Awards, which will be November 16th. And we'll be beaming ourselves onto a virtual stage. The final thing is that we're hosting a webinar this Friday about the U.S. infrastructure bill and its implications for blockchain and crypto. And the conversation is going to be chaired by me, but our special guest, Perry-Ann Boring, who's president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, which is a big trade association in the U.S. and really globally on blockchain, and also Michael Desmond, who's a lawyer and deeply involved in congressional law. He's a partner at Gibson, Dunn, Crutcher, LLP. So a lot going on here. The revolution continues. Anything else, Alex, for this week from you?
No, good summary for the week. We'll see you next time.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.